I thank you very much for tuning in to That Will Never Work podcast. Most entrepreneurs say they trust their gut, but ignore the numbers. So today's guest, Christian Brim, shows us how financial data tells a story about discipline, direction, and leadership, and why avoiding that story can quietly sabotage your growth. Let's talk about it right after this.
Educate, empower, enable, impact. Thank you for tuning in to That Will Never Work, an award-winning podcast where we share inspiring information and personal experiences related to business and the entrepreneurial journey from those who are leaders in their respective field. Now, here's your host, author and business coach, Maurice.
I want y'all to know that financial intelligence is leadership intelligence. And I want y'all to understand that our guest, he helps entrepreneurs understand that data is not judgment. It's actually the feedback that we all need to move forward. So, Christian, first of all, I want to say thank you very much for coming on to the show. But when you look at a company's financials, what's the first story you're usually able to read that the owner doesn't see?
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Maurice. I think the first thing I can see is where the narrative in the owner's head
Mm-hmm.
is different than where the business story says.
Mm.
So I believe as entrepreneurs we have this superpower to be able to see what's possible,
Mm-hmm.
to see things as they could be, as opposed to how they are.
Mm-hmm.
That vision can sometimes turn into delusion when we ignore the reality of the present. And the story that the numbers tell is reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so that disconnect between what the entrepreneur thinks is happening
Mm-hmm.
versus what's actually happening, do they see it and do they understand it? That's the big thing that jumps out to me.
So how does that reflect in our everyday life? Because a lot of times we think that we're better business owners than we are in our personal lives. But sometimes we could kind of see that there is some type of parallel, right? These bad, behaviors that we might not have broken away from as a kid, that we might have seen, all those type of things. And then we realize at some point in time, maybe by someone like yourself who says, you know what? You might need to go back a little bit. Let's understand the origin. So would you think that people need to understand maybe where did that behavior may have started off at in order for them to see how they're moving forward in their financials in personal and or business?
Well, I think eventually, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's work that has to be done. I think the first step is seeing where the disconnect is,
Mm-hmm.
where the distortion of reality is. Um, I think you can look at two numbers and get a really good picture of whether your business is healthy. How much cash do you have? And is your business profitable to the level of your peers? Um,
Mm-hmm.
just looking at that net income, and it depends on your industry, and
Mm-hmm.
there's ways to obtain this benchmark data. But if your net income is not matching your peers, that means that you're not performing as well as they are. They're
Mm-hmm.
doing better than you are with the same size, same resources, same number of people,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Um, and then the cash balance is a indicator of business health, because you
Mm-hmm.
can make a lot of money, but if
Mm-hmm.
you don't retain it, like you take it out and you just increase your lifestyle, or you are having to service a lot of debt,
Mm-hmm.
or in the business, whatever. But like if you haven't built up a healthy cash reserve, that's an indicator of a problem.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So I think identifying it first, but then yes, absolutely going into, okay,
Right.
why is this way?
And see, I brought that up, and even you touched on it by understanding our value.
Mm.
Sometimes we don't know our value because you stated if I'm going to look at my peers, I know
Mhm.
that I'm speaking from my own past experience. If I look at my peer, exactly the person who's doing exactly what I'm doing, I'm going to find a reason why they're making money versus why I am not,
Mhm.
and I may not put enough value in what my skill set is, how I can sell, my inventory, whatever it might be. So how do I understand my true value in that situation, especially if I'm looking at what my peer is doing and what the image might look like from the outside.
Well, I think most business owners uh, are, and this is certainly my personal experience,
Hmm.
is there's a underlying fear of loss, failure,
Hmm.
and that suppresses our pricing in
Hmm.
general. Like
Hmm.
to flip that around and say it a different way, everybody's afraid to raise prices.
Right.
Okay.
Hmm.
Um, but to answer your question, I would say how you perceive yourself and your value is largely irrelevant.
Mm.
And I had this conversation with a group of creatives a couple of weeks ago at a roundtable I was doing on Profit First for Creatives, my
Mm.
book, and it was specifically around pricing. And I made this statement because everybody was basically running down this rabbit hole of, well, I can't raise my prices. The only person that can define the value and therefore the price is the customer. Your side of the fence, how much time, how much cost you've got into it, even what others in the market are charging,
Hmm.
have little to do with it.
Mm.
The person that decides whether or not you're giving them, or what value you're giving them,
Hmm.
is them
Hmm.
and only them. And so we get locked into our heads about, like, well, I have to charge this, or I can only charge this, or so and so is only charging this, without truly understanding what problem you're solving for the customer and what is the value they perceive.
Mm. Mm.
Because I'll give you an example. There was a
Hmm.
videographer at our table, and he had two distinct different customers. One was
Hmm.
he worked with nonprofits, and then he worked for profits, but the deliverable was largely the same. What he
Hmm.
did
Right.
was largely the same.
Right.
But as we went through this conversation, I'm like, okay, do you think that the value that the nonprofit receives is different than the value of the agency that you work for, the marketing agency you work for?
Hmm.
And he was like, well, yeah, of course. And I'm like, well, that's it. That you nailed it on the head, because you do the same thing. It takes you the same amount of time, same
Right.
costs, but the value they receive and perceive are completely different.
Hmm. Hmm. And I know that for a fact,
Mhm.
because I've done a lot of work for religious organizations, and so with that, um, they pull on the heartstrings a little bit more, and want to devalue, quote unquote, how you perceive yourself to some degree. Like, hey, you want to do this, it's for a greater cause, talk you out of what
Mhm.
you really think your value really,
Mhm.
comes down to. And so sometimes we allow our emotion get so entrenched in that situation because people play on that.
Absolutely. And again, we have this underlying fear of loss and failure.
Hmm.
So it's I heard another speaker, another creative, say, he said, I'm tired of getting paid in experience bucks. I said, because I can't spend those.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of people starting out use that justification for not charging enough, because they're
Hmm.
like, well, I need the experience. I need to get the exposure. I need to put this in my portfolio, whatever. Which is fine if that's what you want to do, but understand that's a belief. That's not necessarily reality.
Mm. Hmm. And so I had a conversation with another entrepreneur where he talked about he for a long time he was caught up in trading his time for money. So
Mm,
so basically he was only charging $50 an hour for this, but he was not able to really put himself in a position to say, you know what, I need to be on a higher level of thinking, a higher level of experiences, whatever it might have been in his business, and also in relation to, I don't need to be doing this for 80 hours a week at the same time. You
hmm
know,
hmm
and so as you're stating about raising those prices because of these type of organizations, they're talking to us and they think that, hey, you know what, your portfolios look great because you have hundreds of clients and things like that, but you're only paying me $50 an hour. I'm killing myself in the meanwhile.
Well, I think that's a very common trap that business owners get into, especially if they're a service based,
Mm-hmm.
of trading time for money. But the reality is that is a employee mindset. That is not an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people that come from that just never get out of that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I I think that it is inherently self-limiting to
Mm-hmm.
charge by the hour. I figured this out very early on in my career. I had a guy that came to us, and he hadn't done his taxes in 3 years, and so he had a big mess.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, we'll do it, and it'll be $100 an hour."
Mm-hmm.
And he flipped out. He said, "I don't even pay my attorney $100 an hour. That's outrageous." And so I went back and I thought about it. I'm like, okay, what's the absolute most time this could take us? Like
Mm-hmm.
worst case scenario. And I figured it out. I multiplied that times $100 and I came back to him with a price. I think it was like $2,000. I don't remember what
Mm-hmm.
it was. And he was like, "Oh, okay, that's fine." And that's exactly what that taught me. Was like trying to build by the hour is a fool's game. You're
Mm-hmm.
you're
Mm-hmm.
you're you're just going to cause yourself problems.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes when we look at that number being 2,000, being for a project, or when we put in our RFPs, whatever it is, sometimes we don't understand um, from the other side, employee mentality. Like, that just seems like so much money, so I need to
Mm,
break it down for individuals, all those type of things.
mm.
But then we kind of get lost because that $2,000, is that for a 2 week period? Is that for a 6 week period? Whatever it is. So if it's too long, then you actually can have the opportunity to actually decrease how much you're really getting paid. Like, that's one of the things I had explained to one of my clients, that, hey, you know what? You want $100, but is the $100 really going to cover all the other things? Like you said, from a creative perspective, I'm using this software. Now I need to go back and redo this and that. How many reiterations can I do X, Y, and Z? Whatever it is, you can actually decrease your value, in that as well. So a lot of times I've heard people kind of pull back on, hey, you know what? I don't want to give the actual number because of that idea.
Well, yeah, and to me that kind of goes to making sure that you've clearly defined the outcome, right?
Good point.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
Scope creep is a huge thing. It's a real thing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's absolutely, if you have a very well defined scope and outcome deliverables, if it falls out of that,
Mm-hmm.
then you absolutely have the right to raise your hand and say, "I'm sorry, the price changes." I mean, if
Yeah.
you don't have to do that, but if you do, the price changes.
Right.
But I Chris Doe is a very famous creative influencer, and he had a recent LinkedIn post about this with a customer where they had the customer had given them a budget,
Mm-hmm.
and so I don't know, say it was $100,000 for
Mm-hmm.
this project, and Chris came back and quoted them 120.
Mm.
And they came back and said, "No, our budget's 100. You don't understand." And he said, "No, here's the deal. I've been doing this a long time, and I know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have changes along the way, and you're going to have things that you want that you don't know yet that you want or need.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that that's going to happen, and so I'm building that into the price up front."
Mm.
Yeah. And the client was like, "Okay, yeah, you're right." And
Right.
they accepted the higher bid. But I think ultimately, what we're talking about is still thinking about it in terms of our side of the fence, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to what's the value they receive.
Right.
I have a whole chapter in my book on pricing and specifically value pricing. And um, I was first introduced to this concept uh, after the guy that compared me to his attorney. Um, I was introduced to this concept, and I my brother was my partner at the time, and I said, "Let's try
Mm.
this out." We had a client that had sold their business, and we had worked with them on the tax planning of it. And I said, "Here's what I want you to do. I want you to send them a bill. I want you to outline what we did and the resulting tax savings to them, the dollar amount,
Mm. Mm.
and then say pay whatever you want."
Mm.
The concept is 100% tip. So, and this doesn't work in all situations,
Right.
but it illustrates value pricing in this mindset very
Mm-hmm.
well. And so my brother was like not real comfortable with that idea,
Mm.
but he did it because he's very analytical. And they came back, and before they paid us, I said, "Okay, how much time did you have in that project?" And he said, "Maybe 10 hours." And I said, "Okay, what's the most outrageous hourly rate that you would have charged them?"
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "I don't know, maybe $350." And this was a while ago, so that was a healthy amount.
Right.
So $3,500 is what you would have charged them. Yeah. Uh, the client wrote us a check for 15.
Mm. Mm.
Why? Because that was the value they perceived.
Right.
Yeah. If we had billed them $3,500, we would have left a lot of money on the table.
Right. Most definitely.
But you can't do that in every situation. That was a transaction. It lined up real well to use that method, but it showed me that at the end of the day, we don't really know what the value is, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
guessing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we only have the feedback of, well, people aren't buying anymore, or people are quitting our service because we raised our prices. That's the only way we get any feedback. But that assumes that all clients are homogenous, right? Which they're
Right.
not.
Right.
And so, like, the people that don't buy, there are still people that will buy, and they'll probably pay more, right? Like, so
Yeah.
you don't really ever know what the value that your customer receives in most cases, especially with services.
And I think some of that is who is our community at that particular moment, right? Our perceived community that we have at that moment. Because sometimes you don't know who's going to come across you or your services or your product, whatever it might be, in that time. And so sometimes we look at ourselves within this box, not understanding that social media is global. Let's be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to use
Yes.
social media, right?
Yes.
So you never know what's going to be that one thing that's going to hit, and
Mm-hmm.
and so sometimes we put ourselves in this place where, hey, you know what? That $350, $3,500 is enough revenue that's going to come in. But I have a question for you though. When we look at it like that, is it sustainable? Are we able to stay in that place? And are we able to grow in that space?
Well, and this is a challenge But I think the ideal way to approach this is to find a problem that you can fix
Hmm.
that has enough value to the customer that you can make a good margin on, that is repeatable. So like I have this, I found this client with this problem and I'm solving it. Are there other people that have this same problem? So that one, I can grow the business, I can scale it, I can repeat it. And two, I can create a process internally to be more efficient and do it. So I'm not having to go out and every single time try and figure out, okay, what's the value this person receives for what I've done.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be ultra customized. I think it's just a
Mm.
conceptual idea of, okay, if an agency has this problem and I solve it for them. So I had a agency that was on my podcast, and he had an agency, a marketing agency, and he decided to pivot. And what he does is short form video
Mm.
for founders,
Okay.
but he does it primarily for other agencies because the agencies would tell the founder, the business owner, hey, I need some video so we can do
Hmm.
social, YouTube, whatever, advertising.
Hmm.
But they couldn't get them to do it. And when they did get them the video, they were looking down their nose or they were out of frame or, and they didn't say the right things, the right intonation.
Hmm.
And so basically he gets on Riverside and he interviews these people and
Okay.
he makes sure he gets the hooks and he makes sure that they're in frame and right.
Hmm.
And so like it's he and so then he was like, okay, surely there are other agencies that have this problem.
Mm.
And sure enough, there were. And could the agencies do it themselves? Absolutely, they could. But that would mean having to hire somebody else.
Mm.
And so in this time of great tumult and change with technology, a lot of the old systems are falling apart.
Yeah.
A lot of the old business models are falling apart. But there's the reality is the work still needs to be done. And so it's where are the opportunities? So with every change, there is an opportunity. And it's
Mm.
about finding it, one that you can deliver value, make a profit, and repeat it.
Mm. So first of all, Christian, I would like to say I thank you very much for coming on the show. Our time is drawing near, but there is one thing that I am hearing in that, and I would like for you as you answer this, transition into your information, if you will,
Okay.
right? Play around, play with me, and so I hear that we can be as entrepreneurs, as visionaries, we get fearful
Mm,
of change. We
mm,
can't adapt very well in this position or in these places, and so now we are um, really hesitant because, like you
mm,
said, the our infrastructure feel like it's
mm,
crawling, it's falling apart, but in reality, it probably has not. Only because we're so used to being in this box, right?
mm.
And so how do we make sure that we are put ourselves in a position to adapt, to change, and then let us know where they can find your information?
We had 10 clients come in last week to Oklahoma City from all over the country.
Okay.
And we just had this meeting of the minds to talk about what's going on. And the themes that I heard from their feedback, and I agree with them. Um, One, rely on your network. Relationships are even more important in these times.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Two, don't define the future in terms of your current skills or expertise, your skills. Rather, shift to looking at where are the problems to solve.
Mm-hmm.
One guy came in and like he was despondent the first day. He was like, the sands are shifting. Agencies aren't hiring me anymore. I don't know if I'm going to have a job. And after talking to this group and thinking, and the next day he left there, and his mind was just on fire about like all the opportunities, and like, and so that's the third thing is, you know, don't despair. Don't
Mm-hmm.
look at it as the sky is falling. Yes, change is happening. Yes, it's scary. So adapt and start looking for the opportunities, because they're there. 100%. They're there.
Yeah. So let us know, how does that relate to what you have to offer to the people that's listening today?
Well, yes, I forgot to answer that part of the question. Sorry.
You okay?
You can contact me at christianbrim.com.
Mm-hmm.
That's where my speaker, my books, my blog, my podcast. If you're interested in our financial services, it's coregroup.us.com. We work exclusively with creative professionals. So check either one of those out.
I appreciate that. So, one of the things that you have mentioned today is about making choices and understand what our outcomes are, right? And how they really reflect about how we move forward. So my question to you is, which I ask all my guests, is a choice. Would you rather choose 3 doors or a fork in the road? Now, mind you, again, let's think outside the box. Let's be imaginative.
Yeah, I thought about that. And the thing that came to my mind was I would pick the doors because they're inside. And, if you're in a fork in the road, that means you're outside. And there are a lot more unknown variables out there. So you may only have 2 choices, but there's a lot of wildlife and weather. And, I'm assuming that I open one of those doors and there's not a tiger. But, I guess it's possible.
Have you expressed any fears with us right now, Christian?
Well, I mean, if you're not afraid of a tiger, there's something wrong with you.
I know that's right. But no, I appreciate you. Well, here's the thing. I'm going to tell you what one guest did say about the doors. They thought that the doors were glass. So at least if they were glass, you would know if there was a tiger behind it already.
There you go. Perfect.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Maurice.
You're welcome. And I greatly appreciate you. And I thank each and every one of you who are listening today. But I do want to leave you with one idea. Please review your last 90 days of financial data and identify one pattern you might have ignored. Also commit to a monthly financial review meeting with Christian, possibly, and even if it's just you and your spreadsheet. But I thank y'all very much for listening, and I'll talk to y'all just a little bit later.
Thanks for listening. Follow Maurice Chisholm on social media to stay connected, and check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, that will never work. Or will it?